Alright, time for another draft physics video presentation. Second one today, I guess. Anyway, we'll do some of these comments, and there's enough here to go forever. But anyway, so let's begin. So, a sock account for the gazillionth time. So he makes a whole account just to make this stupid, in bold claim. You cannot point the Hubble telescope at the sun. Yeah, we've already had this conversation about the limitations of the Hubble telescope, and as I explained, first of all, I don't believe it. Okay, I think it's absolute nonsense. So their theory is that just the light from, and again, the argument is there's thousands of cameras up in space right now, and the space shuttle and the space station, I'm sure, have telescopes on them. The point is, you don't need a very big telescope up in space because it's such a huge advantage. So any one of those a 4-inch telescope on the space station can do the experiment. But anyway, yeah, it'd be really great to do it with the best telescope you got. And I'm only making this argument just because, like I said, I'm not suggesting they use the Hubble telescope if they're worried about it, being damaged in some way. I'm just saying that this argument, I think, NASA's can do. NASA got Apollo 13 astronauts back to Earth. You know what I mean? NASA is a can-do place, not a can't-do place. So it's sort of just bullshit to say they can't figure out how to do it. So here's the sun. Point is, from space, it's all black right next to the sun. But we already know there's a corona there. Even though if you can't see it, it's there. So you would never look at the sun. You're just looking at a star here or a star here, right? So this is the only place you have to look at. So you don't have to put your telescope into the sun at all. The sun's not in the picture. You're just trying to get this star or this star in the picture. So first off, that's the truth. Their argument is that even when the Hubble telescope does that, so even if it's a whole diameter away from the sun, some light from the sun, will hit one surface more likely than another. Sun's over here, let's say. It'll hit this surface and bounce inside the telescope and blow the whole thing up, which is absolutely nonsense. It won't happen. But anyway, by this theory anyway, they're saying that much of tiny bit of peripheral light that would get into the Hubble telescope could somehow destroy it. Well, the truth is there's a bunch of garbage in space, around the Earth. And the Hubble telescope is, say, that far out. It's not way far. It's far, but not far out far. And so there'd be garbage all the time flying, when the telescope is looking into space. There'd be a piece of garbage that could reflect light at any moment into the telescope. And that would be far more like, sun glare, light that hits something shiny, shoots light into the telescope would be far more destructive in terms of the amount of photons. So right there, that sounds like, no, I don't think that'll ruin the Hubble telescope. But anyway, the other thing is the thing has a cover, a lid, that they can, they open and close. So there's a lid on it. And obviously if you put the lid, when you're looking at this little piece of space, you could have the lid open that way. And that way you don't have this light problem. The only light that could get in would have to diffract straight off the top edge of this. And that would be a tiny amount. So you really don't have a big light threat. Just for the sake of argument, I just think it's absolute bullshit that there's no way they can modify the telescope to view near the sun. Again, you wouldn't have the sun in the view of the telescope. That wouldn't serve any purpose. You just want the star. Okay. So, just for the clarity. Now, nobody said in the recent video anything about using the Hubble telescope to do the Eddington experiment. So again, putting this in bold type as if it means something to somebody, as if somebody said that when they didn't. So it's just such a lie comment. Just typical troll behavior. Alright, so let's do, I guess we'll do this one first. So, low, slow, I don't know what that is, but anyway, would want a response to this, please. So, it's a Reddit conversation started by the American slave guy, I guess. So he says, made a YouTube video response to DraftScience and his claims that gravitational lensing isn't real. So you ought to stick with that claim first. Okay, so went right to my textbook and made a response video. Your textbook doesn't say anything about the experiments that prove whether or not gravitational lensing is well evidenced. So it's not relevant. In the response, DraftScience states Einstein's equivalency principle is wrong. Well, the equivalency principle doesn't really have a fucking anything to do with it. It's only tangentially related to the fact that Einstein established that gravity affects photons twice as much as regular matter, which is kind of a bold assertion. And that they never tested it beyond Eddington's light experiments. No, I said they never did the Eddington experiment, never successfully repeated it. That's what I said. All right. Now, they have done other experiments, but those experiments, you can't really tell the difference between scatter and lensing when you're doing it inside the sun's corona. So, as a NASA scientist points out, who did laser research for NASA, so you ought to know, they never saw any gravitational lensing, NASA, outside the sun's corona. And obviously inside the corona, scatter would be the logical explanation. That's the entire thing in pop science. So when I asked him to source how general relativity is wrong, you asked me to do that somewhere? Oh, I don't recall you asking me to do something. I recall you saying, I don't think so. And then I recall you saying, well, if he's wrong about his physics, he's wrong about everything else. That's how I recall hearing from you, fuckhead. Anyway, he says something like, how can you source a lack of experiments? Well, it's true. It's not my job to prove you don't have any evidence. It's your job to show up with some evidence. Okay, so it's like he's saying that Einstein's equivalency principle is wrong. I've explained why it's wrong. It's not wrong for any magical reasons. It's just wrong to say me pushing you with gravity is the same as me shooting you with a gun. Because that's what this equivalency crap comes down to. It's a stupid idea to say that all accelerations are the same, because they're not. All right, now if you want to say all velocity is the same, well, that's almost moronic, because velocity is defined by traveling distance in a certain amount of time, so of course all of those would be the same. But the problem is we don't know what all velocities are. Right? When you're getting forced down by gravity, how much of the energy, okay, ends up making you fat, okay, pushing you down, okay, like distorting your shape, versus how much of the energy is actually moving you. And the same question could be if I try to push you in space by you applying gravity to you, you do understand that the effect is going to be completely different than if I push you in space by bashing you in the head with a hammer to give you acceleration. That if I bang you in the head with a hammer, I'm going to end up accelerating you in all kinds of directions. I'm going to make your skull smash and move sideways. So I'm going to convert velocity this way into velocity this way and this way. And I'm not going to be very efficiently moving you in through space. I'm going to be moving pieces of you into space. So there's no point in putting an equal sign here. I'm saying it's not a useful thing to do to look for equivalencies there. It doesn't serve any purpose. Okay, and then the question would also be is, if I say all velocities are the same, I have to be very careful to recognize that if it's a basketball player and he's running a certain distance, a certain speed, and then I say, well, the ball's moving the same speed. Well, I have to understand the ball's going up and down as it does this. So the ball's moving two speeds, okay, in two directions. So obviously it's moving. If I calculate the distance the basketball travels to get from point A to point B, that distance is huge compared to the distance the player walked or ran or dribbled. And you can understand that's a huge difference. And my argument is so why make this equivalence thing? Because they're probably not equivalent. Okay, the thing that you think is going, the earthling is traveling 22 miles an hour on the surface of the earth. Well, maybe he's moving faster than that, because maybe the atoms are actually doing something different. Maybe the atoms, like the basketball player, are bouncing back and forth in the gravity. Gravity pushes down, the earth pushes back up. Can you feel the earth on your chair right now if you're sitting? Can you feel the earth pushing your ass up? You know, you're moving. Your atoms are doing more than what you appear to be doing, which means your atoms actually have a much faster velocity. Why make an equivalence, is my point. Why force there to be one? It's stupid. It's unnecessary. It's not useful. That's my point. So it's like saying that Einstein's equivalency principle is wrong, but won't source it because it hasn't been tested again. I'm saying, how do you test that? Except with tests that have something to do with logic. Do you actually think that your atoms are still moving only in one direction, down from gravity? What do you think they're doing? Okay, is there anyone who can help me on this? As far as I know, gravitational lensing must be real because they use the Hubble and several other telescopes to double check these things. Or am I wrong? They're not double checking in any way the same way. So they don't use the Hubble to redo Eddington's experiment. Solar lensing is different than galactic lensing. The two images are very different. The way you process it's different. It's a different kind of mechanism with different liabilities. If they could redo the Eddington experiment, it would be good, clear evidence. Okay, arguing with crackpots is really rarely fruitful. So again, this is the same old crap. Let's just call them a name and pretend we won, and we presented something called evidence. The equivalency principle and its different variations. Well, what's a variation of it? The argument is gravity's bent twice as much by light is bent twice as much by gravity because Einstein wanted to make the equivalence. All right. And then the argument is there any evidence of this? First, that light's even bent by gravity, let alone bent twice as much as all other matter. Have been tested. See this section, modern usage. So it's a nice page of quotes, which and different websites and different sources. So there's lots of crap here, and it has lots of the history, but obviously no part of it is detailed. But yeah, you do have the Einstein quote about you're never going to see an Einstein ring, so that's there. The stuff that they haven't overcome as physical facts are in these facts, but no one who's obviously this would take a very long time to detail through every one of these different arguments made through history by different characters. Very long time. Okay. Light diffraction at solar lamb. Einstein only half correct. So they claim Einstein's only half correct about something, right? I mean, it's just kind of funny. This is the increase in the number. So this is the part that matters, right? So Einstein, in his first version of the relativity paper, he didn't double the influence of gravity. I mean, gravity on photons. And in the second version of the paper, he doubled it. So that's all that happens here, right? I mean, a little more than doubled it. It should be 1.68 if it was a doubling, instead of 7.4. So I don't know, but the point remains, he doubled it effectively. So anyway, obviously I can't go through all of that crap, but the point is that is there any experiment that's decisive? No. Is there any image that's perfect? No. Is the evidence really, really, really strong to believe? No. So, and that's what they won't admit. Some wise part of me is looking at myself like, see, this is what I tried to tell you, but no, you had to argue with him anyway. So again, just this more evasion. I don't know what an entire discussion even is here. The DraftScience guy is an angry moron. Try calling out his utter lack of knowledge and you'll get his angriness. I don't know. What should you get? If you look at some of his videos, reading and responding to YouTube comments, you have to be very careful. No, you don't really have to be that careful. You obviously all have really lousy, rotten attitudes, and you can't say anything without that coloring your arguments. Again, I've successfully posted comments on Professor Lewin videos without being blocked. You know, I mean, if you can't show somebody a little bit of respect, then what are you expecting? Frankly, offend this snowflake. Yeah, well, regardless, I have a right, okay, to say you're not allowed to misparaphrase me. You're not allowed to lie and put words in my mouth I didn't say. I mean, your arguments are all straw man crap. If you can't do better than that, then don't post comments. He will outright delete any comments that are the least bit challenging to him. No, that's just a lie. And it's demonstrated by the fact that I read the comments and I point out how I never said that, or, you know, that's a complete perversion, that's a quote mining. You know, you're obviously guilty and you just don't want to admit that. So that's just like you won't admit that your evidence is weak. I mean, you're just compulsive liars, essentially. So let's move on. I don't know why you posted. So see, there's all this crap about nothing. It's just crackpot. So, you know, we still don't have a single response to the double slit video pointing out how any of that's wrong. Pointing out how I said anything inaccurate. Okay, whatever he says, so hopelessly wrong. So, yes, again, hopelessly wrong, but yet they can't counter-argue any of it. That it's not even worth debunking. Yeah, I can't pay you to do it because you can't do it. Yeah, that's right. GR has been extensively and repeatedly tested. So that's just the same lie over and over and over again, right? I mean, what's extensive and what's repeated? You didn't repeat the Eddington experiment successfully, so you certainly can't say that repeatedly was tested. And again, the other extensive tests are tests where it's inside the sun's corona. So, and you can't figure out how, if you're doing the lensing inside the sun's corona, that, you know, there could be a fact that the fact is you're not, the lensing isn't what bent the light, the diffraction bent the light, the refraction off of the particles in the corona. So, and you have no way of testing. You can't see the difference between lensing, you know, a photon that curved and a photon that hit something and went off at a new angle. You have no test for that, but you can tell the difference. I mean, an honest person would say, yes, the experiment has to be done outside the sun's corona or it is sort of bullshit. All right. And it's verified to a ridiculous degree. So that's what he says, right? That's all we got. LIGO can see, he can measure with a beam of light that bounced off 1,600 mirrors. They can measure 1/10,000th of the width of a proton because we say so. It's ridiculous physics. Okay. It's like here he's pretending the last 100 years didn't happen. No, I'm arguing that the last 100 years you've been doing absolutely nothing. Physics accomplished nothing in the last 100 years. It did nothing. It made nothing. The blue LED was made with 27 years of experimental work, not any theory. Your theory didn't work. Your theory didn't make it. Okay, experiments made it. All the technology we have was made through manipulating physical devices, not because they did some theoretical calculations. It's all just horse shit. Your physics sucks. It's produced a Higgs boson and fantasy gravity waves. Even though his mummy must have lived for most of that period of time. I don't even know what that means. The most fun you can have with DraftScience is if you play him against other crackpots. How does that do any good? Oh, I don't know. It's like a backyard cockfight. I don't know. I shouldn't point out that Ken Wheeler's full of shit too, or somebody else who's full of shit. Okay. So I don't know. Example of how careful you have to be even when you get him to address your comment. Even changed my YouTube username to that. So he's somehow proving it by showing his own troll comments in my videos. Oh, well, that's a real waste of time, isn't it? All right. So there's really no point, right? I mean, I could play my own videos, but frankly, they're for the record. And I'm sure if somebody plays the whole video, and these are time-coded, but I'm sure if they play a few minutes before that, they'll get the idea. The most fun in questioning his disability. So here we go. You know, that's fun for these people, these trolls. They have some right to imply these things about my personal character and my personal life. Amazing. He's doing it right there, overtly. You know, amazing. All right. So that's all there are is comments. Let's see if there's any replies in here that have any use. Okay. Some good info in these lecture slides. Oh, this is great. So I wonder if you actually read it. You know, the part like where Einstein said you'd never see an Einstein ring. You know, anyway. In my experience, no amount of evidence will ever convince a conspiracy theorist or a crackpot that they are wrong. So again, they haven't provided any evidence. What amount of evidence have you provided that the Eddington experiment was successfully repeated? Oh, that's right. You don't have any of this great amount of evidence. So again, just more lies. They're pretending like they actually do have Hubble telescope images of solar lensing when no, they don't have any of those. If all else fails, they will simply argue that your idea is forged or otherwise untrustworthy. No, I've pointed out exactly what it is. It's bad evidence. It's really nice that you have some lensing images, right, from the galaxies, but as somebody else has demonstrated, some of them are obviously some sort of synthetic thing because the image going this way repeats going this way, the same exact image, and lensing doesn't do that. So that's got to be an artifact. Some of them are impossible because the projection, the screen you're projecting the image on, can't be a magnification because the object is smaller than the original object. You can't project a bigger object onto a smaller screen and magnify it. So lots of them have theoretical problems. They all have a mathematical problem relating to a complete lack of symmetry. And symmetry in gravity is something fundamental to strong gravity is strong symmetry. So these are little basic physics ideas. And again, it's those basic principles that you have no respect for. All right. The reason I've heard from sociologists is that their contrary vision is really in their ability to disprove accepted facts is tied to their core sense of self. So this, you know, this is just more horseshit. They tell a phantasmagorically silly story about, well, a single photon goes in, it splits into two photons, it goes through two separate slits, and then turns into wave functions and interferes with itself, and then decides to go someplace and become a real particle because it never was real in the first place because it was a superposition of 17 million different locations. And they say that's so intuitive that I should believe that. Just because they told me the story, I should automatically believe it. And then when I went to go look to see what the evidence for that phantasmagorically silly story was, they don't have any evidence for it. They just made it up. Okay, is that their ability to just and then these are people analyzing other people's psychology. Amazing. It's just amazing how dishonest these people are. And their ideas come from places of emotion, not logic. Well, clearly that's your problem. Again, you can't even emotionally deal with the fact that your evidence is weak. You can't even admit, oh shit, yeah, I wish we had better evidence. You can't even say that. You're so afraid to indicate any possibility of doubt that you can't even be honest enough to say, yeah, I wish the evidence was a lot stronger. Okay, it's analogous to convincing Hitler he shouldn't be anti-Semitic. Yeah. Yeah, a simple logical argument that people aren't genetically greedy. You know, it's not a genetic concept. It's analogous to convincing Hitler he shouldn't be anti-Semitic. Holy fuck, that's what it feels like. This appears to have the same screen name. He's quoting himself? No, I don't know. Oh, okay, that's the guy saying it's great. Okay. I imagine this is the, American Tool or whatever he is. Holy fuck, that's what it feels like. It's like he wants me to go look up his claim to come to his conclusion. So again, this is how bizarre it is. You go to the trouble to research it, and you point out how I can only find 2 attempts to repeat, 2 attempts by professionals to repeat the Eddington experiment, and both of them failed for technical reasons. One of them, I pointed out the fact that the eclipse was too low on the horizon, so they couldn't get good enough data. And the other one, again, it was some sort of rain, some kind of crap. And you're claiming that now I'm doing something wrong by pointing out what I've found to be the truth. And you're claiming you don't believe it. You believe there's an experiment, but you don't have any responsibility to point me to it. I mean, what an amazing piece of shit. Oh, there's a lack of evidence that proves the currently adopted standard wrong. So again, he thinks it's a well evidence theory, and I'm just not finding the right experiments. So I guess he would tell me that they figured out what the spin of the electron was because they actually did an electron spin experiment on an electron, and that they didn't use silver atoms. I mean, he's just going to tell me what the truth is, and I don't have any right to even point out that that's not in any historical record. Oh, anyway, there's a debate technique called the whatever. It's all these semantics, all these little games they play. Their little Dunning-Krugers and all the little spewy crud. Anyway, spew as many claims as possible, as rapidly as possible. So I don't make that many claims. And yeah, I do try to talk as fast as I can, just out of courtesy. But regardless, they're all real points. I mean, what random points did I make on the subject of lensing? There's a lack of symmetry in the images, which is sort of glaring and means there's something wrong, because strong gravity has to create symmetry. So what's wrong with that argument? The argument that to magnify something, you actually have to project it larger than it currently is. And if you're not projecting it larger, you're projecting it smaller, that you can't be magnifying. Is that a claim that it's spewed? Oh, anyway. Your opponent won't have time to counter them all because there always takes more time. Oh, now this is your tactic. It doesn't matter if they're based on reality or not. Well, frankly, I've made the videos on the subjects. I've narrowed the conversation as much as possible. I've asked direct questions, no responses. So this is just more horseshit, more lies. They can't tell a true story to save their life. It's just a fact. It's really the waste of time even try to argue with somebody using it. They're not interested in what you have to say. No, they've already heard what you've had to say. I've already heard about your fake detector experiments, silly in theory. Where have you answered my point that how can you hit a mirror 1,600 times and know how long your light beam is? How can you do that? Okay, believing they're outsmarted the rest of the world and is more important to them than anything you could ever argue. Well, again, it would really be important for you to be able to counter-argue something. Prove me wrong, which you can't do. You have failed to do. I see that on Reddit as well. Replies are getting even longer, even more repetitive. Oh, there we go. Yeah, the same trolls apparently show up on Reddit. Alright, so that's it for that thread of bullshit. Where's the rest of this shit? View all comments. I mean, this is a brilliantly stupid website. I mean, you can't view it all on one page. It breaks everything to page. So that was the, okay, because that's the great one. So that's, we already read all that, right? So I'll try the other one again. See if this thread has anything more in it. Apparently not. Okay, yeah, there's nothing extra there. Alright, so that's it. So yeah, that was all very exciting. Great arguments, blah, 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 blah. So, fuck this garbage comment. Make arguments or fuck it. And you didn't do that. Were there any arguments on that whole Reddit page that had to do with physics? No. Right? There was no physics argument anywhere. Just this veiled as somehow decisive evidence of something, right? I mean this page. So I mean, like I said, it's not a bad page, but it doesn't prove anything. It's a bunch of paraphrases. That's it. A fundamental limitation on the accuracy of angular measurements is observational cosmology. On the propagation of light in inharmonious cosmologies, I mean effects. Oh, okay, well, I don't know. Those are some other guy's quotes. Let's get back to an Einstein one. Let's see. Gravitational test, brief history of lensing. Well, guess we're not going to find one of those right here. So anyway, drawn wrong here again, right? I mean, it really doesn't work this way, where the light is bent on both sides of something and gets to a point. That's not really, a practical reality. So anyway, none of the lensed images will show up in that part of the lens, the center of the lens. None of them look like they're in the center of the lens. They're all on the edges of the lenses. Alright, anyway. So back to the comments. And just get the hell out of here. Okay, update. I skimmed through Joe Rogan podcast episode and a Sam Harris podcast episode. I only found Cross talking about the double slit and delayed choice experiment in the Sam Harris podcast episode. Oh, okay, now he's changed, so he edited it. His point was that so you wasted my time in a sense, right? I mean, I watched the stupid Joe Rogan thing. I jumped through it and I said, there's nothing in here. His point was that doing a measurement on a quantum particle is an extremely disruptive event. Well, you can't do it. Look, this stupid word measurement is retarded. There are a billion activities. Billion, it's a silly word. A billion times a billion times a billion activities happening inside of me. They are not measurements, okay? They're not information being gleaned and being stored somewhere and all this crap. It's just stupid to call it a measurement, all right? A measurement is an explicit thing you're attempting to find. All right, a specific amount of information, and you can't glean the information. So again, you can't use a photon to see an electron because an electron is smaller than the dimensions of the entire photon. Right now, the quanta of a photon is infinitesimally small. Okay, much smaller than an electron. So, but the polarization, okay, again, of a photon is big, 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 big. Electron very small, okay? It's 1,000,000 times smaller than the polarization of the photon. A billion times smaller than the polarization of the photon. Obviously, I can't throw a photon, the whole photon, that is the waves, the ray. I can't throw a whole ray at an electron and get a whole ray to reflect off of an electron. It's impossible. It's silly. It's nonsensical. It's just absolute fucking rubbish to think you could possibly do that. And obviously I can't hit a photon with a photon and get a fucking image of a photon. So theoretically there's no hope of ever detecting photons in any passive way. Duh. I mean, fuck. Alright, anyway. Setup. Okay, delayed. Let's see. Somewhere here. Okay, Harris podcast episode. His point was that making measurement of quantum particles is an extremely disruptive event. That you're not really rewriting the past in the delayed choice experiment, but whatever the initial setup was is what caused the disruption. You can't. Well, I don't know what to even say. That obviously, if you believe there was some sort of like you changed the outcome of the entangled particle here, and then some other thing happened back in time, like you re-erased a previous event. I mean, that is really stupid if you fell for any of that crap. I thought he had made another comment on the double slit and delayed choice experiment on Joe Rogan, but couldn't find it by skimming through the episode. Yeah, I couldn't find it either. Thank you. Maybe it was in another podcast or talk. Maybe it was just Sam Harris thing, and then I mixed up the two or something else. Yes, I've never ever come across the exact thing I'm talking of, and it's irrelevant to the double slit discussion on this channel. I'll mention it, and if it's relevant, I don't know what that means. Anyway, I've heard Lawrence Krauss say on Joe Rogan podcast episode, I remember correctly, that he doesn't believe the double slit and quantum eraser experiment interpretations are correct. That he thinks they're missing something, and that, well, this is the original comment, so I don't know. So I guess he should have said, well, then go back to my original comment. I don't know why he didn't do that. You could have corrected that, frankly. Well, anyway, it's not there. But what there was there, okay, was this stupid part. So I'll play this stupid part because it's just so fucking stupid.
Negatively charged would not make the world difference. It's an arbitrary name. Martians could call electrons positively charged and protons negatively charged. There's nothing fundamentally important about the word positive charge. It doesn't mean any different than a negative charge. So I could change right now, I could make I could change the charge on every electron in the universe and flip it. It's signed. So every electron is negatively charged now, but now suddenly I'm God and I make every electron positively charged and I make every proton negatively charged. Nothing about the laws of physics will change.
I don't understand.
All right, so this is the part where, but obviously we know that the significance of the positive and the negative just had to do with the fact that we know electricity does move in a direction in the sense of from more densely populated with electrons to less densely populated with electrons. So the fact is that charge, okay, the fact that there's an electron and there's a proton, we could have understood them, okay, as either plus and minus, because there's nothing, it doesn't mean anything. There's no minus function and there's no plus function. The only function there is that these two are opposites, that they act in a field exactly the opposite. And that would have been the smarter thing to do, is to call them yin and yang, or to call them blue and red, or to call them two things that would have gotten rid of this whole idea of charge. But the fact is they named electricity first. And electricity was about a flow of something, electric water, as Benjamin Franklin thought of it, or whatever. And that's where this designation of having too much water plus and too little water became significant, is there's a direction to the flow of electricity. And that's why there's positive and negative on electrons and protons, is because of the designation of electricity having a flow. And it is these negative things, it turned out, okay, that are the ones doing the flowing. But now that makes it kind of not rational, because we know it is a piling up of the negative things, okay, that makes it flow from high pressure to low pressure. So if Franklin would have gotten this flow direction right, okay, and understood that it was the electrons flowing to less electron pressure, higher electron pressure to lower electron pressure, well, then these two things would have been labeled opposite. And now it does make a significant difference, because now these two things are working in tandem, in the sense that now we understand that it's a buildup of electrons that makes something electrically high in potential or pressure, and that it goes from high electron pressure to low electron pressure. So amperage and voltage now both go in the same direction. in the Maxwell equation. So you fix Maxwell's equations by fixing this. But obviously to fix this, you have to first fix this, because this is where the bad thing started. And obviously giving these a plus and minus is also breaks it in the sense that it doesn't really get to the idea that this is really north and south. Okay, that this is obviously that also equals magnetism. And magnetism just gets you to this idea that the two things aren't one thing is more than the other. The two things are fundamentally different. The opposite idea. Plus and minus isn't really opposite. It's having a volume of something and then having no volume. 1 and 0 aren't opposites. So it doesn't get you this inverse idea where negative, like 1 and negative 1, positive 1, that's the opposites. So this really is an important subject, and he's talking it like, oh, it wouldn't matter. No, it does matter. Your mechanics fits together much better. You have a lot more continuity if you understand first that these are opposites, and that the opposites can have a pressure that creates a flow. Okay, so that's where you need plus and minus, is when you're flowing it, one of these quantities. And this quantity never flows, so obviously all of your electrodynamics are going to be about what electrons are doing, not about what protons are doing, because protons don't go anywhere, and electrons do. So I'll just play a little bit more of it, but I'm just saying, he's talking like this doesn't matter, and when of course it would matter. Well, I don't know, there's nothing I can say. It's really a critical mistake in physics that they have this understanding wrong.
Why wouldn't it change? I mean, is there a function of them being positive or negatively charged?
No, it's just a name. That's why it's like calling, I could call up down and down up, and it wouldn't make it.
As long as it's a noise you make with your mouth.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, okay.
So the name I give it is irrelevant.
Okay, so it's not like you would change the actual function of the electron.
No, exactly.
Right, but you would change the actual function of getting electricity going in the right direction in the sense of understanding it's electron pressure that creates voltage. So voltage becomes rational if you put a plus on electrons. It becomes irrational, okay, when you put a minus on electrons.
I call it's electrically charged. That's important.
Okay.
And it repels other electrons because they have the same electric charge. That's important, right?
I know, but the real important part is electricity and magnetism are created by those charges. So if charge did just charge, this conversation would be fine. If all you happened was charge. But no, electricity and magnetism are a byproduct of how those two charges react when they're in dipoles. So that's what's really important.
Right. Two electrically negative charged particles repel.
Right.
But look, if I made them both two positive charged particles, they'd also repel. So the physical consequences would not change at all depending upon how I named them.
I see what you're
Okay.
saying.
Now, so the example I use in the book to try and sort of describe that is a chessboard. You got white squares and black squares, and you play with the white chessmen and the white. If I changed all the white squares into black squares, and I rotated the board by 90 degrees, it would look identical.
Right. But then you have to remember that, oh yeah, but part of how this game is played is that a bunch of the black squares can be moved, okay? You can pull them into a place and make more of them in one place and less of them in another place, and that they have a tendency to move to lower pressure. So, again, it's just stupid to say the board only has these two functions of black and red, when we know that the black squares are much more mobile than the red squares. So the protons are locked in their positions. They're harder to get to go anywhere, and obviously the little electrons go somewhere all the fucking time. So anyway, they're moving, much more vibrating, much more mobile. And that mobility is what is creating magnetism and electricity. So it's just so stupid. So anyway, yeah, so that's enough of that. So I'll delete this since I've read it, because I don't think this whole thing means anything. So he's suggesting somehow y'all contact this Krauss idiot who believes all kinds of wacky shit. He doesn't believe anything rational. His whole fairy physics of expanding universes, big bangs, he buys into all the black matter bullshit, crap shit, So whatever. We'll remove this mush. Okay, so Sunni versus Share. No, Shiite. Is that how you spell Shiite? Share? I don't think that could be Shiite. So anyway, we'll just get rid of that because we really don't need it, Dave. Thanks anyway. What can I figure out about the semantics? So the scientist in name only is whether they have bigoted and petty motives to start with, or whether the institutions are a corrupting influence on them. Well, gangs are gangs, obviously, I suppose. And the point is all this stuff is, there's just so much subtlety and complexity to every little element of it, right? I mean, none of this stuff is as simple as they attempt to describe it. And, but you could say, though, except for cases like the double slit, where you have something very simple that they made incredibly complicated. So the other example is that the experiments are very complicated and they need to simplify them. And then there's the case where the experiment is incredibly simple and they need to complicate the outcome. You know, but the point is that there's a lot of moving targets, a lot of stuff going on, and unless you want to get yourself into it deep enough, superficially you have to trust them. There's a lot of, you just have to trust what they say crap to this physics thing. I still don't buy that as an excuse. I'm still sitting here saying to you, honestly, you know, in 6th grade, I can tell you the moment I just said scientists are just as unreliable as the rest of them. And the moment was when they draw this wavy ton as being a photon. And I just said, no, you got to do better than that. That doesn't make any sense. You know, these magical fields are somehow, you know, what are you talking about? Field of what? What are you talking about? Bent space? What are you talking about? You know, that's not an explanation. That's a non-physical real thing. It's not physics. I mean, you call the subject physics and you have a bunch of angels and ghosts in it. So hell with that. It's a straight line. Why you gotta mess with a straight line? A straight line works for me. Point A, point B, a certain constant speed. Well, I can get that. That's easy. Why do you have to make a mess out of it? So I'm just saying why they fall for it, I don't know. But obviously once you sit there and say waves or something, you understand waves. It's like even in a swimming pool, right? You can watch the water doing all this stuff, and you can watch the light reflecting on the bottom, and you can do all that, and you can say to yourself, either you can say, gee, you could just calculate what every one of those movements are, right? These are all just reflections off the side. If I make the side round, I get a different reflection. If I make it flat, I get a reflection. And you can look at it and you can say, yeah, you know, I get it. There's a whole bunch of them happening at once, and they're, you know, you have all these interactions, you know, or you can say in some way, you know, it's magic, or, you know, I don't know how to say it. It's like the painting, right? You can think of the painting as being just the painting, and that there's an infinite amount of density to everything. You know, like the person's arm in the painting is like our arms, you know, like it has a whole bunch of texture to it. Or you can understand that, no, it's a bunch of tiny little pixels, you know, a bunch of little tiny dots, and you're getting the illusion of things, you know, but you're not seeing, if you really close in on those dots, it really isn't look like an arm anymore. You know, it's two ways of understanding it, I suppose. And so if you fall into the artistic way of looking at it, like it's blurry is okay, I don't know. I don't even know how to... I mean, I don't think there's anything fundamentally dishonest in these people. I just think there's something fundamentally dishonest in the sense that obviously the advocates are, you can see their paranoia. They're so defensive. And the fact that they can't admit that the evidence is weaker than they would want it to be, that it's not as strong as like a theory of evolution or something. The evidence for entanglement is a lot weaker than the evidence for dinosaurs. And they can't even make concessions like that. That's the amazing part, where you just say, oh, this is about something else. Yeah. I mean, there's men right now who like to wear women's clothes, and they find it interesting. And it's like does something for them. I can't imagine it. It's like the phone sex thing. I can't. What? Talking like that weird shit on the phone turns you on? How the hell does that work? I couldn't figure out how that worked. So I don't get it. So all I can say is I just don't get you people, how you think waves, oh yeah, that's so cool, or, I get it. I don't get it. That's all it comes down to, maybe. But it comes down to more, obviously, because obviously their desperate effort to defend their crap using all kinds of shenanigans and bullshit methods and, character assassination, all kinds of how low they will go, how low they will stoop to defend this horse shit is just so, evidence of something. So yeah, Gil, the zillionth time is blocked. Okay. Yeah, don't waste your time on the trolls. They're superior mind. Anyway, so enough of a video. Alright, so, I mean, the lensing subject, unfortunately, does have two subjects. There are the deep universe pictures, and then there's the more relevant, gravity on solid objects, you could say. Solid objects versus clusters of objects. And again, I've made the point that clusters have a huge amount of a density problem. There's so little density in the collection of objects that they can't be producing much gravity. It's got to be incredibly weak gravity. Anyway, that's all you can say. You either get it or you don't get it, I guess. So, till the next time, and such and so forth and whatnot.